All right. Hey, everybody. It's the 27th of April, 2023. This is Plutus PBL live coding. We meet every Wednesday and Thursday at 14:30 UTC to talk about whatever comes up as people are working through the course. What we do is we drop some ideas onto this Miro board right here where people can suggest what they want to talk about in breakout rooms. We vote on which one people are most interested in, and that one stays here in the main room. And then we break out into the other rooms as desired to talk about whatever we want to talk about. Module 202 is live this week, but as you can see, there's interest in talking about a lesson from 101, about module 102, and that's exactly how this is supposed to work. The course content is rolling out a little bit more every Monday, but the course is designed to be self-paced. And if you're working on module 101 or 102 right now, you're moving at exactly the right speed. Okay, so I hope that people will keep bringing questions from your own journey through the course to these sessions. Anybody have any questions or things you want to share before we jump into 2 minutes of just dropping ideas on this board? All right, I see 2 good ideas already that we could jump into. If you need a reference of what, for example, these lessons refer to, that's of course in the course. And you can review the module list if you're just trying to find out, hey, do I want to talk about this idea too? What I'm going to do is set up 2 minutes on this timer just to give everybody a chance to drop some ideas on the page. If you don't have access to Miro, just drop your ideas in the chat and I'll be sure to transcribe them to the Miro board. Unmute if you want to say anything, but otherwise, see you in 2 minutes.
All right.
All right. I just saw the PBL curse on this board, but I guess that was a typo. I was really interested.
Oh no.
Okay, recap, summary. This is a good question. I'm kind of thinking these 2 purple questions are good intro stuff. Maybe we can go through these together for just a few minutes before jumping into breakout rooms. This one. Can somebody say a little bit more about what this one means? New wallet recovery of PBL course.
So I think that means, who was I talking to? Maybe it was,
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got you, Solo.
Hey,
Hey,
so
so basically, I ended up losing access to the wallet that are connected to the PPL course. The good thing is that the token, the PBL token, was in the wallet that I created during the course. So I ended up sending the token to the new wallet, and I connected it to the PPBL course now, but it pretty much doesn't recognize the course progress. It just looks like I'm having to start from scratch again. So I'm wondering if there's a way to just use the token to update the course progress so it can reflect in the system.
excellent. All right, yeah, this is a good question for us just to talk about quickly. You're exactly right. Like if you were able to, it sounds like you lost access to the browser wallet, but maybe you still had the CLI wallet and you were able to send your token back to a new browser wallet.
That's correct.
Yeah, excellent. So you've still got your token, and even if you lost that, you could mint another one. Remember, we're working on pre-prod right now because we expect mistakes to happen. We expect people to lose keys or lock tokens where they shouldn't be. That's exactly why pre-prod exists. So I just want you to know that we're all good. Now, when it comes to registering course progress, all of the little things you see in the UI, basically anytime something turns green in the course and says, you did this learning target now, all of that is just for you, okay? It's just to show you a little visual indication that you've been successful or that you've made progress, but none of that is recorded either in a database. We don't have one, okay? This course is a fully headless application right now. But it also, or I should say serverless. I mean, there is one head. The head of the application is right here. You can see it. But anybody could create their own version of this course just by accessing the blockchain. Okay, all of the information that we're actually using. Now, what does go on chain is your contributor data, right? The record of having mastered modules. And each of these, you got to make specific commitments. Okay, so in order to get credit for modules 100 through 103, you have to press the commitment button in module 103. And then we will release, we will update your datum accordingly. But even this information, this isn't associated with your wallet. This is actually associated with your contributor token. So if you want to see the visual feedback once again, you can redo any assignments. But if you're going through the course and for example, right, maybe you're in the mastery assignment right here in 102. And yeah, if I do this correctly, oh, whoops, I'm in the wrong browser right now. But right, if I do this correctly, I can see at the bottom of the page that some things turn green down here. You don't have to do that again, right? That all of that visual feedback, once again, it's just for you and it's not reflected on chain anywhere. Does that make sense?
Okay, okay.
Now, someday in the future, we might all decide, and I'm including everybody here, you might decide that you want this course to have some back-end database because there's some information we want to keep track of. That's something we would talk about together, right? I would like to maybe have a back-end database so that we can have little discussion boards on each of these lessons and assignments. I think that would be kind of interesting. But to do so, now we would have to use another server, and that opens up new questions about whether or not we want to do that. So yeah, we'll come back around to that question in the weeks to come.
Okay.
Regarding terminal, I don't know of any fun games. There's a link to this tutorial in lesson where was it? Lesson 102.6. This is my favorite Bash or shell scripting tutorial right here. I think it's very clear, and I think there's a lot of interesting stuff you can do. But does anybody know of any interactive like game environments where you can level up your scripting skills?
Yeah, I asked that. I'm curious. Because as we go through, I'm seeing that the more I use it, the better I'm at it, and it's less sort of scary. But I'm curious if there's a way to like bump up that process to kind of throw wood on the fire, so to speak. Okay, cool.
That's a great research question. Yeah, if anybody discovers anything, I'd be interested too. But yeah, I think there's some good background here, and it'll be fun as you're going to start to see some slightly more advanced examples. And so please, this goes for Newman and everybody. Please be sure if you see something in a provided shell script and you don't know what that part does, bring those questions to live coding. Okay, like that's the kind of thing that we would love to have the opportunity to go a little deeper in those details so people understand it. And then finally, this one, yeah, anybody who was at the Game Changer talk, would you be interested in providing a quick recap of what was covered yesterday?
Yeah, I would love that too. Because they also did a closeout report at the Project Catalyst Town Hall. I'm just wondering, because I remember first seeing it and being like, wow, that really is a game changer. Like, why is it called Game Changer? I can't remember. Why it does some different things, some brand new things that other wallets don't do, as I understand it. No.
Yeah, I can say that I was not able to be on the live code because I was actually with Newman in solo in another room, but I was able to see the town hall presentation, and also after that, Adriano was presented at the Sala de Cafe, and the bottom line is that the name is perfect, Game Changer. It's going to make a lot of good things happening. I think it's a very robust wallet that has many utilities, and the material there is humongous. I think it requires complete course to be able to master it, although it's very well thought and help a lot with what we are doing. So one of the things that Adriano wanted to do is to offer something like a live code for sessions for live code, not in this timing, but perhaps in Discord. And I don't know, James, what do you think about that? Could you expand on that a little bit?
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, he hit me up. And this is the thing, no questions asked. Like, if that's something people want to do, let's start it. I will add it to the official Gimbalabs calendar, and yeah, full support there. I think that's a great idea. And I was talking to the Mesh team about doing the same thing for Mesh this morning. So we're going to start to see different places that people can specialize in using different tools.
Super. Yeah, one of the other things that he was mentioning, he wanted to provide support in Spanish, which is going to be great, because that's a game changer as well.
It's the truth. We're going to need a matrix of all of the languages and all the tools, and just square by square fill it in, right? Over time, hey, are we delivering enough support for this tool in this language? That's going to give us a high level view of where our work is effective and not, and then we can always be working to fill in the gaps.
That would be cool.
Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I stayed and watched it through to the end. It struck me, I think I mentioned it earlier on. It's a wallet, but it's a lot more than a wallet, in as much as you can see the transactions it builds. You can get it's kind of, yeah, you can kind of get into the engine room if you want to. You can find out how stuff works. So the Cardano CLI type scripts, they're all available in it. It will help you. You can write smart contracts in it. You can write, yeah. There's so much you can do with it. It's almost like Adriano looked at what Gimbalabs PBL is doing and wrote it. It struck me as it covers just about everything from what I could see.
Gimbalabs co-founder Roberto Marano has been a huge contributor to the Game Changer work and has been advising Adriano from the early days. So I'm sure there's some spiritual connections there.
Yeah, they're not that hard to see when
Cool.
when you actually see what it does. It was fascinating.
That's cool. Erez, what do you think?
Yeah, I only caught the end part, but what struck me the most was Adriano's commitment and passion to the project, and like his openness and willingness to want to engage with us and to hear feedback and answer questions and to keep coming back. So that's really cool. And yeah, has he was saying that it's only in version 1 right now, but that there's a lot of upgrades coming to version 2. And we also had another question just regarding the live recording. We didn't know, like, Juan, you remember at the end, we didn't know how the live recording turns off. So we're just wondering, does it stop like when everyone leaves the group, or how does that work?
I had to take another call and had to leave it running in the background, and just was occupied when I guess everybody left. So that's why it kept running. For now, the way Gimbalabs live streams are delivered is completely centralized. I have the passwords, so I've been the one pressing go live on these things. I would be thrilled to give up that responsibility to anybody who wants to be the administrator of these meetings. But for now, that's the constraint we're working in. But yeah, let me know if you want to be the live coding video manager. I'm open to handing off that responsibility.
I personally don't, but I thought it was really cool that he was available for much longer than the session and the including for myself.
Juan.
So what? Yeah, I think it's very important to find people to collaborate, and yeah, I mean, it's as much as we can, and right. But the reason I raised my hand is because Adriano has specific requests. He really needs people to break his wallet. So that he wants us to play with it, break it, and give him feedback, which was kind of the message that I got from yesterday meetings with the game changer. He said, "It's there, just break it and tell me how."
That's a sound development philosophy, especially when you're on pre-prod. Just don't bring that philosophy to mainnet, okay, everybody? It's really good. Well, so as you can see, this is Game Changer is one example, but along with it, Mesh, Plutus, Aiken, even tools we're spending less time with directly, like Lucid or Option or Helios, and the ones we haven't gotten to yet, like indexers, which we're going to need to play with coming up pretty soon. All of these tools are still incredibly new, right? Blockchain is incredibly new in the grand scheme of things, okay? But a lot of this developer stack for Cardano in particular is very much brand new. And I hope that everybody here is getting incrementally more confident that you can be a driver of this work, right? Every one of these teams needs people to help out on breaking it. And so thrilling time. That's why we operate the way we do here. I happen to believe this is the only way forward, is for us just to all kind of learn together and figure out where the limitations are so we can start solving some of those problems. And Newman, thank you for taking these notes. This is awesome. Really awesome.
It's like, yeah. You're welcome. Thank you.
For today, it looks like we have two strong options. So let's do a quick vote on which one of these stays in the main room. I'm just going to create a voting area that goes around these two boxes. And we can click on sticky notes and everybody gets one vote. We'll get 1 minute to vote. And my goal is to be able to see these results today. This is the thing I haven't been able to figure out about Miro yet. So we'll see if I can achieve my learning target. All right, I'm going to start the voting. If you don't have access to Miro, just drop number 1 or number 2 in the Zoom chat, and that will count as your vote. See you in 1 minute.
While we're waiting for the vote, I have a quick question. For the Cardano node installation, is there like a more detailed video somewhere that for somebody that is not like used to the command line interface at all, like the installation process, is there like a detailed video somewhere?
Excellent. I know I'm trying to think of the last time we made one at Gimbalabs. I don't think we've ever quite done like here's the step-by-step for all of the processes. Which approach do you prefer to take? Are you trying to just install the binary, or are you trying to build from source?
Build from source. I'm dumping it on the an SSD external drive.
Okay. Yeah, that's I think this is a good example of something that we can get together and troubleshoot anytime, whether you want to get a study group together in the Gimbalabs Discord, or if that's something we want to cover during one of these sessions. I think that's something we could go deeper into, but yeah, I can't point you to a link that guides through the whole process.
Okay.
It looks like for today, got a couple of 2s in the chat and 1 vote here and a couple votes here. So it looks like for today, we're going to zoom in on module 102, building simple transactions with Cardano CLI and locking funds at a contract address using Cardano CLI. And I think this is a really timely thing for us to look at together. So thanks for surfacing this one, everybody. I'm going to make 1 extra breakout room today. Well, I'll make 2 more just in case anybody realizes there's something else they want to talk about. Just call this one 101.4. There's going to be a second unnamed breakout room, and those are open now. But for now, in this room, let's zoom in on this one for a moment. Let's see who's most excited. All right, Newman's ready for this. I think a lot of people are ready for this. And we've kind of noted in thinking about some of these other tools that Cardano CLI is really influential. If you can build up your mental models for how transactions work by building them with Cardano CLI, there's a lot of evidence that that's going to give you some advantages later on, no matter what tools you try to use to build your applications. So I'm excited to jump into this one today. Now, it sounds like maybe a good place to start would just be with lesson 102.3, and we can kind of go through these in order. So lesson 102.3 is about building a simple transaction. Then there's one about unlocking funds, or excuse me, locking funds at a contract address. And in between, there's a mastery assignment. Would it be okay if we just kind of go through these in order and see how far we get today?
Yeah, that sounds good for me. So much of the time it's getting, and this is just from my experience, it's basically still getting the setup. For instance, I was like, okay, here we go. I'm about to start, and I ran through my Cardano node start. I've got it started up, and it hung up midway through, and so then now I've got so I was like, oh, I'll just kill the terminal, which and start over. But then I get an error, which I'll paste into the chat. So I wonder, so it's sort of like, to start on 102.3, still have to get like the setup. So I'm like trying, I want to play the game, but I still need to get like my cleats and glove and bat together.
Oh man, without a doubt. And I would love for, if anybody else wants to share screen and drive through some of these details today, I would love anybody to step up and do that. Before I request that though, let's just, Newman, I'm so glad you mentioned this, because this kind of points to why it's challenging to build these courses, because it's always hard to know exactly if we're covering all the details, and we never do, right? There's always something missing. And so I'm realizing, for example, that one of the things that's not documented in this course is just how to stop your node. And I'm sorry about that. We should probably include that. The way to stop a node here, I got one running right here, right, is by pressing Control-C. Control-C. And when I do, watch, you can see it says shutting down. And this is what is going to make it much easier next time I start my node for it to start up correctly. Okay. If I just close the terminal, the reason you get this message, right, the DB is used by another process, is that there's still this, it looks like there's a file called db/lock that's left behind when you don't close the immutable DB, essentially. Okay. So one thing you could do to fix this, you could probably find that lock file and just delete it.
Okay.
But moving forward, this is just a good thing for everybody to know. And there's no reason you would have known this. We forgot to put it in the documentation.
Oh man.
So that's how you shut down. Control-C. And now if I start this thing up again, I have a script right here, right? It's just so I can type quickly this, and you see it right there, right? Mine opens up.
Okay.
So .100, and there we go. I also use numbers in the front of my personal shell scripts, so I can just type the number and then press tab to autocomplete. I don't have to remember what the file name is. I just know that start pre-prod node is 100. Okay.
Okay.
But you can see that mine got running again without a hitch.
Oh, okay. So find a lock file. Okay.
Yeah.
Would that be? Oh, and then I asked ChatGPT, and it gave me a kill process, and I went through the PDP. I went through a command that like gave like processes running. And it didn't make too much sense to me because there was always two processes going, regardless if I had different terminals up. So I'm thinking maybe, as I say it out loud, like terminals not equal to process.
Yeah. Sometimes you'll get a hanging server running, and this is one of those cases where like turning the computer off and on again is always a good option. You know, and like it's kind of interesting, right? Because like, yeah, like that's the brute force thing that you teach a new user of computers the first time. Hey, if it doesn't work, just restart it, right? But when you go a little deeper, like it makes sense. You know, sometimes I'm lazy with what server I use for a local host when I'm working on a front end project, and I start one server over here in my terminal, but another one in the VS Code terminal, and I lose track and might leave one running. And, you know, sometimes I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to shut this computer down and start again because I just want to make sure that all of those processes start over. And I feel perfectly happy doing it that way.
Okay, cool.
Juan, what do you think?
Oh, I'm sorry. The hands up has been there for a while. Let me turn it off.
Hey, so when it comes to building some transactions, anybody want to take us through the process?
James, just real quick, sorry, I just wanted to add, I sent I found a really good book. I sent in the chat for anyone who needs like help with what's it called, Unix or what's it called, like using terminal. It's a really good beginner's guide. It's helped me a lot. And it's fun. It's like you're a wizard casting spells.
That's cool. Thanks. Well, I'm gonna just look at this documentation a bit. I'm happy to run the demo today, but if anybody else would like the opportunity, just say the word, and you can be our guide today. Now, as you move a bit further into the course, and specifically starting at the end of this module 102, we're going to use more and more shell scripts, bash scripts, okay? Those will be provided. You can learn from those. You're going to see more of them in all of the 200 level modules. But the first time we show you Cardano CLI right here in lesson 102.3, we're going to do it the long way just to get started. And what I mean by the long way is setting each of these variables by hand, and then building and signing this transaction just by copying and pasting these commands. Okay, so now a little bit of background knowledge. First of all, if you haven't noticed this already, when you see a $sign, that's going to represent a variable in Bash. I happen to like using all caps for my Bash variables, but this is absolutely not required. Okay, it just helps me tell these things apart, right? I see all caps, I'm like, oh, variable, right? And lowercase, I'm like, okay, that must be something else. But you don't have to do it that way. And even in my documentation, you'll see that I'm not perfectly consistent with this. But in general, you might see a lot of uppercase values in some of this documentation, okay? But what's critical is the $sign. And so the documentation above this transaction build right here is just showing you how to set the values for, what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4 variables: UTXO in, recipient address, Lovelace to send, and sender address. What's nice about this is if I was trying to build a similar transaction with something like Mesh or Lucid, Or maybe you're even starting to see, oh, right, values can be passed around inside of Game Changer. You're going to need all the same variables. Well, I guess, yeah, it's a little bit misleading to say, I guess, that we must specify a TX in mesh. That's not true. But at least a recipient address and how much lovelace to send. These are examples of what you would have to handle in an application. So everything above this is just about setting those variables. Okay. We're going to get the sender address, and there's another one called sender key, which is referenced at the signing step down here, right? In order to unlock a UTXO from an address, I got to have the signature for that address to unlock the associated UTXO. So we can set those variables first. Oh, sorry, there's like a line on my screen right here. Why is that there? I'm going to have to follow that, shut down the computer advice, see, because I don't know where that's coming from. Still there. Still there. Wow, this thing is resilient.
Oh man.
That's weird. I don't know why that's happening. All right, I'm going to ignore it for now. But that's annoying.
Turn
Sorry.
it down, just an example for what needs to be done.
Computers break, right? All right.
Go back to basics.
Here we go. Okay, so yeah, the first thing it shows you set those two variables, your address and the sender key. The only reason I need to specify the actual address is not because I need it to grab the UTXOs from there. The only reason I'm using the sender address is so that I can send change back to it. Okay, which is different from needing to know the address, right? The address that holds a UTXO in is actually inherent in the UTXO that we're unlocking. Okay, so in other words, the reason I'm using sender key right here is because of the UTXO in specified here. And it's independent of the fact that I'm referencing some sender address. Kind of a funny concept right there. But yeah, I just want to be clear about why I have sender address at all. Harsha, what do you think?
I was just curious, if we don't specify the change address, would the default address be the recipient address, or would the command not pass?
Excellent. Okay, good. It wouldn't pass. Now, it's possible to build a transaction without a change address if it's perfectly balanced otherwise. Okay, and maybe I could do that. Let me try to build an example of a perfectly balanced transaction that maybe doesn't even require a change address, but I promise you it's annoying because I have to first calculate what the fee would be. I have to subtract that from the change I'm going to send to myself, right? And change address is just so beautifully convenient because it takes care of that part for me. All right. Now, how do people feel about querying an address in the first place? Right, this is the other place where I'm going to use the sender address, is so I can look at it and find a sufficient UTXO in.
That process seems to be straightforward. Back to the change address. Maybe I missed the point that you were making earlier. I got distracted a bit. What is the fundamental use of it? Again, is it for, let's say, the transaction fee, or what exactly do we use it for?
Excellent. Okay. First of all, the change address specified here, at least for right now, this might change in the future, can only handle Lovelace UTXOs. Okay. So if I have any native assets in a transaction, those have to be perfectly balanced. Okay, so for example, the number of test tokens, let's say I mint a bunch of test tokens. The number of test tokens in my TXNs has to match exactly the total number of test tokens in all of my TX outs. Change address allows us to not have that constraint when it comes to Lovelace. Okay. So this allows me to do two things. One, notice I'm not calculating the fee by hand right here, which is a really, really nice convenience. Okay. So this transaction build, which is an upgrade from an earlier version that was called transaction build raw. Okay. And what build raw did is it allowed us to start building a transaction, but it requires us to specify precisely the fee. So first we would have to calculate the fee, and then we can do the math of how much Lovelace are left over after whatever outputs we want, and we pay the fee. This just abstracts all of that away. It sends the fee to where the fee needs to go. And then it says, okay, well, whatever Lovelace you sent and whatever the fee was, that's being consumed in this transaction. All the other Lovelace that were in this UTXO, they're simply going to go to the change address.
Okay, so this change address, is it the computing of the transaction fee itself, or does it just take care of the balance and dump it back into your address?
Yeah, so this under the hood change address has to reference the fee of this transaction. Okay, so it's like a self-referential function. It says, okay, in the transaction I am in, I can calculate the fee for that. And then that's just arithmetic from there. Okay, now subtract that from the change and send the rest to this address.
Okay. Interesting, an interesting concept. I asked this question before because we were discussing, I think it was 2 weeks ago, about, setting the UTXO in for that transaction fee and how big you want to set it, because you don't know ahead of time what that fee is, or what the accompanying Lovelace to the UTX. So when you, let's say, sending like a token or something similar is happening here, in a sense that the change address is taking care of that process and then dumping the balance back to the sender address, technically.
Exactly.
Okay.
Here, let me show you something else here.
While you're getting set up, this is sort of like those like send your change to like a savings account or a charity or something. I remember it was like a big, it was like a feature for banks some time ago, where it's like, oh, round up for your college fund.
Yeah. Yes.
That would be so cool. Like, yeah, just send all my change off to somewhere, or put it somewhere and you're like, oh, this is what you're like, having a change card, like when you do the thing. It's pretty cool.
Well, so funny story about that. That's actually how Yoroi worked originally.
Really?
The old Yoroi wallet would always charge a higher fee than, say, Daedalus, when back in the day, those were the only two options. And Yoroi was always rounding up to a nice round fee and taking the extra as basically the price of using that wallet.
And that is the plot of Superman 3 with Richard Pryor,
as famously referenced in Office Space, right?
and Office Space. That's right. This I love that this is part of it. Yeah, I love that this story is just like, because it's one of those things where we don't think of it as a lot, but man, it's a ton. It's in Office Space famously, $300 and some $1,000 or something.
And I would argue this is basically the entire business model of Web 2, right? Right. People are making billions of dollars off of taking tiny fractions of all of our attention.
Yeah,
that drives the only real business case that people were able to invent from Web 2, which is advertising. So here we go. Let's do better than that.
Boom, boom, boom. Mark it down. Yeah, nice.
We got this. Dan, what do you think?
I was just going to say, you got to be careful about sending your change somewhere, because say you've got a UTXO with 1,000 ADA in it,
Yeah.
and you're sending 9 ADA to somebody, and the fee is 1. I know it won't be 1; it'll be a lot less. But so 10 ADA is going out of your 1,000, which leaves 990. That's what you want to get back. You don't want to be sending that to somebody else.
You know, let's talk about a nice business model for a probably profitable scam. If you could create a version of Cardano CLI that looked for all intents and purposes like this one, and somehow trick people into installing it on their computers, so that when they try to build transactions with Cardano CLI, it works exactly the same way, except you just introduce one little line that says, hey, whenever change address is used, always send the change here, for example, right? You could hack CLI that way and write your own version. Right? It wouldn't be that hard to do. I mean, you get caught quickly enough, so you'd have to have an exit plan, right? But like that's possible.
Good.
And the real moral of the story for all of us is like, yeah, hey, do I trust this software, Cardano CLI, well enough to simply write transactions that have that line change address in them, or any of it, right? Am I familiar enough with the software to know that it's going to do what it says it's going to do? And that's why maybe you've noticed if I type Cardano CLI version, it doesn't just tell me what version I'm using, but it also gives me this git hash. And the purpose of this is I'm supposed to actually go to the repo for this software and make sure that the same hash is represented there, right? And that's one way of me knowing, okay, the software I have here goes with this source code, and I can review this source code until I'm satisfied that I can trust it, right? And how many of us read terms and conditions though? Right? This is, but that's the option for really making sure that we can trust these tools.
I would, yeah, yep. It would be cool if there was a good UX behind that, so that you really could, so you could just highlight it and then, like it's scripted out,
Yeah.
goes and checks it. Because you can do it, but it takes, it takes a few minutes, takes some time, takes some attention. Yeah.
It's one thing if, for example, the scenario I just described happened with Cardano CLI, within hours, people would notice it and get pretty loud about it.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of having this community. That's the beauty of having the network of SPOs we have running this network. People pay attention, and that's incredible. But where this problem is going to be much worse, this is going to happen, and there will be crises, is that you can build smart contracts, that not everybody's paying attention to, and you advertise that your smart contract does a certain use case, but you add a line into it that maybe you hope people won't notice. That always ensures that a little bit is being skimmed off the top, right? Now, the smart contract itself is not responsible. You then also have to build an application for sending transactions in a way that a little bit is sent here and there. But the more we distribute, the more it's going to be possible to build kind of these dishonest actions into applications. That's why DApp certification is so important.
Yeah.
Now, I put Cardano CLI transaction on the screen just so people could be aware of this. There's a whole bunch of other commands other than building and signing and submitting, like we've been looking at together. Here's that build raw that I referenced a few minutes ago, but there's also the calculate min fee and the calculate min required UTXO commands. You'll see an example of this one in module 203. Okay, where you'll start to see a reference script for the first time, And the mastery assignment for module 204 is going to have you building a reference script. And one of the reasons those are interesting is because reference scripts have a much higher minimum UTXO than typical transactions. If I want to add a Plutus script, an entire Plutus script to a UTXO, often I'm going to have to lock up somewhere between 10 and 30 ADA in that UTXO in order to perpetuate my Plutus on-chain. So you can play with those. I have a couple of wallets. Pre-prod wallets. Oops. Here. List of those. And let me just use, I have a live coding one. Why don't I use that one? So I'll CD into PPBL live coding. This, what I'm doing on my screen right now, right? If these were mainnet keys, I always want to mention this. This would be just irresponsible, right? For me to be going through my file hierarchy and showing you these private payment keys on the screen, right? Since we're on pre-prod and this is a lesson, I'm doing this, okay? I just wouldn't do that. I wouldn't even have my staking keys or on this computer, my private keys for mainnet, okay? But just so you can see it. And what I want to do, sorry, just a little more bash. I can actually set, I want it to be called sender address. One thing I can do in bash is type a $ and then some parentheses, and then inside those parentheses type some command. For example, hat, which just means show me the contents of this file, and payment.addr, okay? And what that does, if I just typed cat payment.addr, I would see this address right here, okay? But since I did it this way, it actually took this output and it put it in sender address, so that now if I type echo, whoops, sender address, you can see that address right here. So now my sender address is good, right? Yeah, keep this design pattern in mind. $ parentheses and then any command inside. You're going to see that in a lot of different ways. In a similar way, I want my sender key to be equal to PWD, which is the current directory I'm working in, okay? And so if I said echo sender key, that's good, but actually that's not quite sufficient because I also need the payment S-key file at the end of this path right here. So let's add that. I can type sender key, which I'm already using, but is equal to the old version of sender key / payment.s-key. And now when I echo that thing, there, that's the path to this file that I want. Cool. So those two variables are set. If I hop back over here, the next few things I need to define are which UTXO I want in, where I'm sending this value, and how much Lovelace I want to send. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, look, you know what I want to do? I just want to send a transaction to myself. Okay, so one thing I could do is right here, I could replace recipient address with sender address. Just put sender address here. But instead, what I'm going to do is just show you, hey, look, if I've already got a sender address, I can set another address like this equal to the one I created previously. Sender address, okay? And now if I echo recipient address, I can see once again, that's the same thing, okay? So I'm just passing variable values in between. Now this UTX, or sorry, this transaction I'm trying to build is just going to send actually two outputs to the same address, right? Because recipient address and sender address are the same. But the thing I still need to do is I need to specify which UTXO I'm sending. And this is one of the parts that I hope this makes you happy that we have automation. You would not want to query an address and select a UTXO by hand every time you build a transaction. That would be incredibly inefficient, right? But I want you to see this just for one or two times to get a feel for what's happening under the hood of every wallet or application that you're ever going to use or build. Now, just to use the tools that we have here in the PBL 2023 Plutus template, this is the live repo that you've already seen reference to. It continues to grow. There's some new contracts already being added to it for some upcoming modules. But in it, we have a directory called bash scripts. Maybe you've already explored it. And in that directory, there's a bunch of scripts that you can use and learn from. So one of them, for example, is get address UTXOs. If I type cat and then get address UTXOs, get address UTXO, okay, I could see the contents of this file. It's a very simple file. It just says, hey, query this address, okay? And sorry, you can't really see, yeah, the way my terminal works is it doesn't always have a carriage return at the end of a file if it's not included in the file. But I want you just to see, this is the key thing right here. Cardano CLI query UTXO testnet magic 1. You're already familiar with this. And then it says address, and then it has 1 with a $sign on it. That's a command line argument, okay? And here's what this means. When I type dot get address UTXO, I have to include one more piece of information after the name of the file. Now, I could include a lot of arguments here, okay? And the way I would reference them inside of a bash script is like this, okay? Whatever I type right here, cat, dog, mouse, okay? Cat would be $1, dog, $2, mouse, $3, when I want to reference them inside of a bash script, okay? Notice as well, this doesn't start with 0. This is not like a list or an array that starts at index 0, because the way it's explained formally is that the name of the file itself is at index 0. It's the first thing we're writing on the command line. Newman, what do you think?
So yeah, first, what's the dot?
Okay, that's our way of saying that says run a bash script. It's such a common thing to do that the way it's represented, and this is not true of all terminals. So anybody who might have looked at this already, but what you will see in module 202 is I was demonstrating how to use one of the scripts on a Mac that has Z shell on it by default. And I forgot to change to bash before I made the video. And so my script didn't work in Z shell because it was written for bash. You'll see an example of that. And when I use a different shell, I actually have to type bash. But because I'm running bash on this computer, we're able to just use the dot like this, which is just a really nice convenience.
Okay. And now, so second question, with those $1 and $2, $3, does it, I mean, that just means like, you know, whatever is there with the space and then whatever is there with the space.
Let me show you something. Let's just make a really quick new script, okay? We'll just call this example.sh. And I'm just going to open it right here in my terminal. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to say, let's You know what? I don't even have to make these variables. What I'm able to do is I could just say echo your first argument was 1. Okay.
Well, would that,
Oh, go ahead.
well, would that, because you've got it in quotes there, would it just quote out the, okay.
One way to find out. Let's see.
Yeah,
what
let's
it
find out.
says,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
I
So
have an
I'm
assumption.
going to run this script here. So I'm going to write this out and I'm going to run example. And if I run it by itself, oh, nothing there. Your first argument was, your second argument was. There's nothing there. But now if I type example cat dog, you can see this result. Okay.
Perfect. Thank
I can
you.
leave out the second one and it'll say your first argument was cat, your second argument, nothing, no errors, it just doesn't have anything, right?
Okay.
And then I can add other one. Okay, I can add mices and mooses and those, oops, cat, mouse, right? Mouse was my second one there, so that's why that went there. I meant to do this, but you get the idea.
But it didn't break because you gave it more arguments than what was necessary.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Yeah.
So anytime you're using a script that does give you error messages for using the wrong arguments, those error messages were thoughtfully included by the author of that script.
Mhm.
And that's a really nice service. Yeah, it's actually bad practice. It's not, you know, it's not good open source development to write scripts that don't provide error messages and just leave people with mysteries, right? But it's kind of an interesting thing. Those errors are not inherent to Bash itself.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, good. Good. That's cool.
So we've got this one, get address UTXOs. And by the way, remember, I already set a variable for sender address, didn't I? So I should be able to say dot get address UTXO sender address. This is going to be that first argument that I'm sending along. And as you can see, it works. It gives me the UTXOs at that address. Okay. Well, I only have one choice. I guess that's what I'm going to use for my UTXO in. And once again, in some upcoming scripts, you're going to see how to automate this part. #2. Okay, so there's our hash, our #, and our index. Cool. It looks like there's one more thing I got to set. Over here, I can see that I also just need to say how many lovelies to send. For now, let me just send 5 million. That'll be 5 ADA.
5 million sounds really awesome.
So many lovelies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eric,
No, I just had an interesting thought. We're looking at all the dollar signs, and I was just imagining when they're gonna change those to like the Bitcoin sign instead, and when that's gonna be like standard in like the upgraded terminal, or even on a keyboard or something, where instead of the dollar you just have the Bitcoin sign like a standard. But maybe that's
yeah, I was thinking the same thing a moment ago when I called this the pound sign. Is that really outdated at this point? That's a hashtag now, isn't it? Right. I can imagine a future where dollars are irrelevant and more people know about this thing because of its relationship to Bash than to the US government. That could be kind of interesting, right?
Cool.
Let's see. Daddy, what is that symbol right there? I thought those were just for writing scripts. Okay, that's probably not going to happen. I don't know. All right, so now I've got all these variables. What should happen? I'm just off screen copying this build right here. And this should work because I think I defined all these variables correctly. Let's see. Yeah, sure enough, there it is. Okay, so this would work. And let me actually just grab while I'm at it the sign bit. Okay. And if I get no feedback there, that means the signing step worked. And finally, I have a signed transaction so I can submit it. Notice that the input to Cardano CLI transaction sign is the same file that was output right here. Okay, so I build to create a file called simpletx, in this case .raw. It doesn't have to be called .raw. It could be called .draft. Some people have different things they call that one. The file extension doesn't matter. What's inside is what matters. But this gets passed on as the input to the signing step, which creates a new output, in this case called signed, which is then the input to the submit transaction. Okay, so it's each step of the way. You're creating a file and using it. And here you can see that transaction was successfully submitted. David, what do you think?
Can you, I'm not sure if it's worth seeing what this simple TX raw file actually looks like, or did we see it?
Excellent. Very good. Okay, so there's a few ways to look at this. One, first of all, just because I'm working in this directory, I won't leave these files here. But when I ran these commands, it created these two files. And there's my simpletx.raw and my simpletx.signed. Now, one thing I could do is I could just look at these files. What does that remind people of?
Oh,
Doesn't this look a little bit like a Plutus script?
Looks like JSON.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
JSON formatted, but remember there we've got some, and here I've got some actually one directory away. Notice that the format here is actually exactly the same, whether I'm talking about a Plutus script or a built transaction. It's JSON. It says, look, here's the type, the description, and some CBOR hex. Type, description, CBOR hex. In this case, it's an unwitnessed transaction from the Babbage era. Okay. In this case, it's a V2 Plutus script. Either way, cool, right? And then how is that all represented? With CBOR hex. And if you've ever heard the word serialization or serialized and wondered what it meant, this is what it means, okay? Serialization is the process of taking a whole universe of information and compiling it down to the same target. In this case, some CBOR hex, okay? And so the serialization libraries, the Cardano ledger spec, which you can read and you can see in precise detail how information is taken and turned into this format, right? That's what allows this entire protocol to exist, okay? Is our ability to have this agreement about how information is taken and translated into this common format right here, so that everything we do can be represented in a similar format. Erez, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm just wondering what does it mean by unwitnessed transaction?
Okay, this unwitnessed is because it's not signed. All right. Let's look at that one again. Let me go back to, and then I want to look at that transaction, but I also want to look at the signed version. Notice that there's actually some similarities. This string right here is similar to this one up to a certain point. Everything I've highlighted so far looks exactly the same. Where do they diverge from each other? Somewhere in this string, you could find the point where they start being different. Obviously, I can tell with my eyes that this one is longer, but the characters at the beginning of this string are the exact same as those right here, but this one was unwitnessed or unsigned. This one has now been witnessed. It's signed, and only a witnessed a successfully witnessed transaction can be submitted to the blockchain. I could try to submit this one, but I would get an error. Well, let me query that address again. What was the name of that script? It was called get address UTXO. Okay, get address UTXO. I want to once again query my sender address. How many UTXOs do you think there's going to be in this wallet now? Remember, there was one a moment ago. And then I built this transaction. So how many will I have now?
2.
One.
No,
You haven't
There's
sent
only,
it
there's
yet.
only
have you?
one
2.
TX out. Who said 2? There's only one TX
2.
out right here. Where's the second one? One of them is right here, TX out. Where's the other one?
change address.
Exactly. This creates a second UTXO. All right. So right now I'm going to see 2 UTXOs. In the first one, there's going to be 5 million Lovelace because that's what I specified. In the second one, there's going to be whatever I had before, minus 5 million and minus a fee of like 0.17 ADA or whatever it is. Okay, I saw that fee a few minutes ago. All right, so watch this. Oh, you know what? This has been happening. I'm sure this transaction worked. And for some reason, there's something wrong with my mempool in the last like 24 hours where sometimes I'm not seeing changes on Cardano CLI. Has anybody seen that one before? This like just started yesterday. I figured it out. But if I try this again, there they are. Okay. That's what I expected to see. Notice once again, this is not an accident that at index 0, I have the 5 ADA that I specified in the transaction. And the second one is the change address. Does that make sense why they are in that order? Because that order matches exactly what I said to do in this transaction. Okay, so you can always look at indexes and you can know how the transaction that created these things must have been built. Okay, we didn't fully, David, I didn't fully address your question here. There is actually a way to read this transaction. Adrian, help me out here. Do you know, what do I type to like actually look at the details of one of these transactions? View, must be view, right?
You text view, I think, or something like that.
View. I can just provide the TX file. Let's try that. So Cardano CLI transaction view simple TX dot sign, for example. Oh, maybe that's oh, right, I forgot this part. TX file. All right. Yeah, here we go. So this is another way to view the transaction. And this is all of the stuff that's encoded in that CBOR that we were looking at. Okay. Oh, how many Lovelace were sent? There they are. 5 million. Right. What was the fee? There it is. Okay. Is there collateral? No, not in this case. There's a bunch of stuff that's not being used here. Withdrawals, time bounds, collateral, governance, all sorts of stuff. Any questions about what we're looking at right here?
So this is the raw data that's serialized into the CBOR, and it doesn't look like it's JSON specifically. It's just a format that's read by the CLI or the nodes. They expect this structure.
Bingo.
I did have one other question, and that was, I think we're just doing this for example's sake. You sent money to yourself, and then you allowed the change address to be the same address. Maybe I'm getting a little ahead, but is it the case that normally it would be a different address for change than well, you'd be sending it to someone else anyways.
Yeah, typically, I mean, I could put your address as the change address on this transaction. And that would just be a way of saying, hey, send all the funds in this wallet over here. There is a use case for what I'm showing you here, and maybe we won't get to go too deep into Plutus scripts today. I don't mind going a little bit over time, but I also want to honor where we're at. I'll officially wrap up in maybe 15 minutes, but let me show you two more things. I want to show you a very common use case for sending transactions to ourselves, and then just do a quick read of the Plutus locking part, because it's actually very similar to this. What I'm going to do, I want to grab my VS Code for a minute. And I just want to open this is the upcoming documentation for module 203, by the way, where we're just going to add one line to that very simple transaction, which adds metadata to a transaction. If you understand everything that we're talking about today, it's only one more step to add arbitrary information to a transaction, but we'll get there. Let me just create a dummy file. Scratchpad.txt. And I'm going to copy into it the transaction build that I used just a moment ago. One of the things that happens often in wallets or in applications is the need to rebalance the UTXOs at a given address. You saw in the wallet that I showed you before I created this transaction that there was just one UTXO there. Sometimes that might be what I want. But if my goal is to interact with applications, for example, from a browser wallet, it's probably going to be better to have more smaller UTXOs than one big one. Okay. And so a common thing that might happen under the hood of a wallet is it can take one UTXO in, but it can create a bunch of outputs. And this is actually what you'll do in the mastery assignment that follows the lesson we've been looking at today. All right. But just so you can see this, watch. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a ton of outputs here. Okay. And I'm going to just say, instead of Lovelace to send, you know what I'm going to do? Let's replace all of those with some, I don't know, let's say 8.5 ADA. Doesn't, whatever. Okay. I could do that. I could send the rest of the change here. And let's just build this transaction just for fun. Okay. So I'm going to take this part off screen and bring my terminal window back. Aha, I finally got rid of that floating line. And I need to just one more time query my address because I want to consume this UTXO, for example. Let's say that that's UTXO in, and I'm going to use this one. And everything else, I think, is unchanged. The sender address hasn't changed. I'm using the same thing for a change address. I'm going to sign it with the same keys. So what I should be able to do is just grab these two lines right here as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste all of this at once. This is another thing to understand about Bash, is if you just copy and paste a whole set of commands into your terminal, they'll just be executed one by one. And if the first one is successful, the second one will try, well, actually, whether or not the first command is successful, the second one will try to run. but this one being successful is a prerequisite of the signing step working. Okay, but I think this should work. I should just get, if this is successful, I'm going to see an estimated transaction fee and then a message that it was successfully submitted. Yeah, there we go. All right, this one was a little bit more expensive. This transaction cost 0.2 ADA instead of 0.17 ADA, right? A little bit more expensive because there's more data in it. There's more outputs. And this will be confirmed soon enough. Let's just query that address again. Hasn't been confirmed yet. And like I said, my node is a little buggy right now. We'll give that a minute to confirm. While we're waiting on that, I want to jump just to locking tokens at a contract address. There's plenty that we could talk about here, but the most important thing to see is that this transaction is not very different from the one we just built. It does have an output to a contract address. And because it has an output to a contract address, I need to include datum. But that's the only difference. You should notice everything else about this transaction looks just like the one we built a moment ago, except that when you have outputs to contracts, you must include datum. And that point is explained in this lesson. Okay. And luckily we're on pre-prod. I promise a lot of people here will forget to include datum at some point in a contract test. I still do, once every week or two. I'm testing out a smart contract. I build a little script to make sure it works. And then I say, oh, gosh darn it, I forgot the datum. What's going on here, right? So it will happen. Stay on pre-prod, okay, until you know that your systems work and that you have double and triple checked that datum is being included, okay? But really, again, that's the biggest difference. There are a lot more differences when it comes to unlocking from a contract. This is more complicated. This is where we have to bring in the Plutus script. We have to think about how we're going to reference that datum. We must include a redeemer. We must include some collateral. Unlocking looks different, okay? I just want you to see this, right? To lock funds at a contract is only one line more complicated than just sending funds in any other way. Locking is really where the adventure starts. Excuse me, unlocking is really where the adventure starts. Any questions about that? Does that feel like enough to get started?
Yeah, definitely. That was wonderful. I love the kind of myceliated thought process. I was like, oh, we'll run through the steps, and it's like, no, it never happens. Like we went into bash strips, we got into some inspirational ideas, we did all this sort of stuff. It's pleasant in a way.
Thanks, man. We're gonna keep circling around and building. Yeah, I love that word, mycelial, right? All these ideas are valuable if they're connected to each other. And I'm hoping that people are really connecting dots right now. If you build a strong foundation, right, now you can go off and specialize in any direction that you want to.
Yep.
Is that script for deserializing the CBOR in the lesson material? It's somewhere.
It's not written there. No, that's a good suggestion to maybe add to some of this documentation. Yeah.
Can you
But
see if
remember
that
that you could just
transaction
type.
succeeded?
Oh, sorry, say it again, Dan.
Can you see if that transaction succeeded and you've got all those new UTXOs?
Yeah, I'll bring it back there. I'll bring it back. I might have to kick my node. Yeah, let me just kick my node for a second. Because I got some troubleshooting to do apparently. It's okay. Eras, what do you think?
Yeah, hey, I was just wondering where all of this came from. Like who wrote all the Cardano CLA? But then I Googled it and I found I haven't had a chance to read through the article yet, but I found an article, so I shared it with the group. Is that accurate to
Yeah.
it's the same Cardano CLI as in the link?
Yeah. As you could see, a lot of Cardano CLI was written in Rust. So it has that in common actually with Aiken, which is interesting. There it is.
Well, that's fantastic. Rust is amazing.
Yeah, Rust works. I know I need to go deeper. If anybody after we finish delivering this course, if anybody just wants to have a study group going deeper into Rust and Aiken, I would be game for exploring together. Notice just last thing about this wallet. All of these UTXOs except the first one, which is the same exact one that I didn't spend in the last transaction. Everything else has the same hash. Why? Because they all came from the same transaction. And the indexes start at 0, but in this case, they count up to 13. Yeah, that's because I threw 13 outputs in there. And the last one is the big one. This is the one that came from my change address. Whereas all the ones that came before that, those were the ones that I wrote by hand. Just making a little more sense than a couple days ago, maybe? People making progress?
I am. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm excited. If you're seeing this stuff for the first time, I'm so grateful that you're putting yourself out there, and thanks to everybody for going this far. I'm excited for you to now start to see what you saw here and to build on it a little bit at a time. Okay. Like we said, you're going to try building 2 more transactions in this mastery assignment. As it turns out, what I just showed you is pretty much what you have to do to build the first one here. It just tells you that they have to have exactly these amounts of ADA, and there's a mastery check at the bottom of this assignment that uses a GraphQL query to see if you've ever had a transaction exactly like this one. Okay, so we're able to verify that kind of thing. And then you'll also learn a little bit about how to include additional native assets in a transaction. It's like sending a simple transaction, just with a little bit more. But what we're trying to do, once again, is add a little bit at a time. Okay, so you can build up this knowledge. Then you'll get to locking and unlocking. You'll have a chance to check your understanding of that in one more mastery assignment. And then later on, you'll think about minting new tokens in the module that went live this week. And next week, you'll start to see about how to add new metadata to transactions. But that too, it's built on the same Cardano CLI transaction build. There's just one more line you can add if, for example, you want to add metadata. A little bit at a time. Any last words before we break for today?
Lots of appreciation. That was fun. This was I think this was we didn't have a breakout room, so we didn't sort of break out, so we all stayed together. I hope that it was as valuable to others as it was to me. So this was this was one.
This was great. It was good class today.
Rock and roll.
Yeah, very nice.
James was doing the heavy lifting. I know you do this all the time, but I was like, James is teaching his ass off here. This is great. This is great.
He's also learning, by the way.
we've got a lot of fun ahead. And right, look at this. This board is going to have a lot of these little squares someday. All right, we'll keep building them out. And it's going to tell a pretty cool story. And I'm looking forward to, if anybody wakes up one day and says, I need a chance to teach, come on in. Welcome. I'll do this for as long as I need to, but I can't wait to be sitting back and watching other people drive. I'm
Yep.
so excited about it.
We are getting ready for that.
I know you are, sir. I'm excited about that one. Harsha, what do you
Little by
say?
little.
That's right.
I had like a slightly off-topic question. So we use Cardano testnet 1, right? And in some documentation, I was seeing they were using Cardano testnet and like 1, 0, some like a bigger number. Like I was just curious, like what the reason was.
Yeah, that number was the testnet magic number for the old testnet that broke last summer.
Oh.
I'm not sure why they used that number. Like, honestly, for me, one of the best things that happened, like that breaking was really stressful actually, because we were running a version of this course on the testnet at the time. And there was all sorts of really cool data that students had started to produce. And suddenly we couldn't use it anymore. So I had to fix all of that. That created some work. And I'm well aware that could happen again with pre-prod, just a little bit more ready for it this time. But the best outcome of that was, yeah, you went from having to remember what that, whatever 9-digit number was, to just using the number 1, which was a major quality of life upgrade for people using CLI all the time. If you ever see that number in the PBL docs, let me know, because I want to, that might be just because we grabbed some docs from the previous version and haven't updated them yet. All right. Appreciate you all. Thanks for this. Be in touch, okay?
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
See you next
Have a
time.
good
Bye,
Thursday.
guys.
Thanks, y'all.